the Mishnah. Kol get, any get. Sheyesh olav eid kusi, any get that has a single aid on it that's a kusi, puzzle. It is disqualified. And notice, when we say get here, we said in the beginning, get is a generic word for canvases all contracts because they're disqualified as aid. However, because we think that they're going to lie. Except a get of a woman and the shikhr of the ebed, which is very similar, we're going to allow it. Why in the world are we more lenient with the get of a woman to allow an aid kusi? We'll see in the Gemara because there's a certain Gemara is going to try to explain. And yet the Gemara brings a story. Now, very careful. The Mishnah says aid kusi, a single aid. So when we are machshered by get, we're talking about there's one Yisrael and there's one kusi signing. Now remember, kusi is that nation of people who converted, and so technically they were all Yidden Mahatayra, but then we didn't trust their behavior. And more than that, the Medrash says they caused us a lot of problem. When Ezra came, they went and right, exactly, and they stopped us from building the base of Mikdash for a number of years. So we had a lot of trouble with them. And Mais, then reads a story. They once brought before him and presented him with a get. Not just one, but both Eidim of Kusim v'Hichsher, and he allowed it, which seems to contradict the first half of the Mishnah. And usually when we bring a Maisa, you bring a Maisa to support what the Mishnah says. The Gemara will discuss that as well. So the Gemara, let's understand this whole story about the Kusi. You tell me that Kusi disqualifies for being an aid, you don't trust him. Sorry? So then the Mishnah would have started off for me. Why didn't the Mishnah just say Eidim? The Mishnah Dafka said aid. So the reason for that. Okay, Gemara. Mani Maslisim. Who is our Mishnah? Because late Tanakama doesn't conform with Tanakama, but late Rabbi Lezer and Rabbi Lezer, nor does work of Shimon Gamliel. Because Kusim was a big controversy about Kusim. Can we trust them? We can't trust them. Taisha brings that we made a gzeir that even their bread is pas akum. You cannot eat the bread of a goy, eat wine, and so on and so forth. So what's going on here? Now we learned when it comes to Pesach and the matzahs that we eat in Pesach, there are two separate dinners that are important. One is make sure it's not chametz, obviously. So that's for the entire Pesach. And the other one is for the Seder night. You want it to be lishma. So you have a number of people who might eat machine matzahs throughout the whole Pesach, but for the night of the Seder, they're going to eat hand-made matzah. Because it's a different din altogether. It's not a question of chametz or matzah, it's a question of lishma. And since many say that machine matzah is not lishma, because it's a machine, you need a human, so therefore for the Sidorim they'll eat. It's the same thing here. So when it comes to matzah's kusi, we want to know whether you can trust them as far as chametz is concerned, and we want to know whether you can trust them as far as lishma. So we have a different number of opinions. Number one, matzah's kusi mutedes, you permitted to eat on Pesach, number one, and the adam yitzebo yedei chavasi Pesach, and even trust them as far as lishma goes. That's the Tanakama. Rabbi Loza says, nah, not only forget lishma, I said it's chametz. They just don't. Because they don't really care so much about mitzvahs. They don't really care. Yeah, and Tracy already asked the question on the Tanakama. What do you mean you're allowed to eat the matzah? But the pas of a kusi was a ban. So he says, yeah, but if he's eating it himself, then it's all right. Then you know that he can be trustworthy. So then it's not a. So Tracy then says here, you can't say that this is the matzah of the kusi because you're not allowed to eat pas kusi. It was a gzeira. So it must be the matzah belongs to the yid. And the guy, the kusi was a laborer, was a worker there, and he made the matzah, but it's a yid's matzah. No, so if it's a yid's matzah, then we have another problem. Then the kusi, as when do we say we can trust the kusi? Those who hold you can trust him when he does it for himself. But if he's doing it for you, let's say he gives you something usher. They don't care about lifnei iver. So Pesach says it's talking about that he is going to join you for the seder, and he's going to be eating from this very matzah. So it's not a question of the iver. Yeah, but because of that Beis Hamikdash thing, and they made it so right. No, because they were nasty, the divisive people, and they gave the Eden a hard time. So they made it punishment. Yeah. That the Eden doesn't associate. But it's not exactly. Yeah, you keep away from his food. Shouldn't be too intimate. Yeah. Nothing chastless, because at the end of the day, they were Eden. They were 100% Eden. According to those whole Gedi embassy. Yeah. And the expression in the Gemara there is, whoever eats pas of a kusi is ke'ilu oichel chazer. You don't find that by a goy. It's a different category. Anyway, so the Gemara continues. Rabbi Elazar can't trust them at all. Rashim goes like this: Kol mitzvah sheher zikubo, any mitzvah that they accepted kusim had been medaktim from within the yid. But those are not, they didn't take on themselves, can't trust them at all. The Gemara in Chulin has a whole discussion. So according to Rab Shimon Gamliel, what happens if it's written in the Torah but not Musik? Is he talking about mitzvahs the Rabbanon, and therefore only if you know that they can be trusted? Or even mitzvahs in the Torah? What happens then? If it's written in the Torah, but they weren't machzik, they weren't Musik, what happens? Anyway, so who's with our mission? Let's go through it. If it's Tanakama, then feel Nami, why can't you trust some other studies? He said they're totally trustworthy. Abelazar said they're totally untrustworthy. I feel like you should not be like. And why trust them by the divorce of a woman? As much as you want to help out a woman because of Aguna, but it has to have hent and vis. It has to be a reliable basis. The Rab Shimon Gamliel, and it very depends. If we know that they're trustworthy, then I feel Nami. Any document that they sign should be trusted. In if they're not, except that we don't have a tradition that they're trustworthy, then I feel like you should not be like them. We should never trust them. This distinction that you make between the get of a woman and all other studies is difficult to understand. Very simple. Let's say the author of Mishnah Gamliel, and we'll say that the Achzi Baha, they take a get seriously, so therefore they make sure they do it correctly. But the Achzi Baha, but it comes to other contracts, they're not careful. Simple. That's why he paskins over here. Mishnah says you can trust it for a get, not others. So the why does the Mishnah say only a single witness kusi you can trust? Abdul Nami. The Mishnah clearly says only one aid. Even two aides should be trusted. If we know for a fact that they are trustworthy when it comes to Gittin, then you should always trust them. Why does Rabbi Elazar say that you only kosher one aid kusi alone? And in fact, in our Mishnah says also aid kusi. Says really, Rabbi Elazar. The author of our Mishnah is Rabbi Elazar, who never trusts them. And yet you do. Why it should be different? What happened was the eight kusi was signed above and the Yisrael was signed below. And therefore the Yisrael signing below testifies, it's like a testament that this kusi is trustworthy. Otherwise he wouldn't have put his name next to it. Yeah, just like it says that you shouldn't sit down, that Yonim shouldn't sit down unless they know who else they're going to be associated with. Because people by association will say, Reish Lakish wouldn't say hello, we had more than you wouldn't say hello to anybody unless you really, if somebody said, if Reish Lakish addressed you, then everyone knew you can be trusted. Because Reish Lakish had an association with you. That's how people work. They link one with another. The the kusi there's no way that you would allow the kusi to sign before you and sign afterwards. If the Chusi was not trustworthy. Then why that single out to get? You can use the same logic with any contract. If the Yid was signed below the Kusi, then it should be trusted. Why do you make this distinction? This Yid was very humble. So even though he was the first one to sign, he signed it below because he saw in that room there were a number of other people. He didn't know who there were mostly Yidden there. He didn't know who the other person would be. He assumed you'll choose Yid, why choose a Kusi? And he chooses them. The other Yidden, they were more chashiv than him or older than him. So therefore he signed at the bottom, let's someone else sign on top. And that's why when it comes to all other contracts, the fact that Yid signed below doesn't prove anything at all about the Kusi. We can't trust him. No, if so, my get, how come you do? So get the same logic. He signed at the bottom, so what? But maybe he thought a Yid will sign above him and turn out to be a Kusi. Why? So what's the difference between a get and all other contracts? It's a fundamental difference. I'm going to pop to teach you. When it comes to a get, there's a special law that we enacted that all the Eidim have to be there together and sign at the same time. So if the Eid, I don't care if the Eid signed the bottom or the top. If the Eid signed on the bottom, let's say, he definitely saw who signed above him because the person was in the room, and therefore, or was going to sign, and therefore we know that it's kosher. Mashaying in all other starters could be that this guy will sign Monday, and another guy will come in and sign on Monday afternoon or Tuesday, and therefore you cannot trust an ordinary shtar. Only Gittin of women can be trusted. What's the reason? Why talk about get? Do all the agents have to be together? If a person walks into a room and says, "Okay, I'm giving a get to my wife. I want all of you to sign it," then the din is that they all have to sign, and that the people in the room they don't all sign, then it's not a valid get. So therefore, because of that din, we decide, you know what? That the agent we're going to sign, they all have to be together. So we won't come to a problem. He would have said kulchem, and if one guy signs today, if you forget, you get somebody else. The machlekes is showing when we say kulchem doesn't mean every single person in that room, or it means 2 out of the people in the room, but they had to be in the room when he said to them. Well, regardless, so by Gittin, we made it in order to avoid any problems. Whoever's going to sign the get, they have to be there in the room together and sign together. But all other studies, there's no such thing as kulchem. You don't have, you don't need to be a shlich and so on. I remember we learned cases yesterday that by Eidim of a get, they're like acting as your shlich. Further about it further, Gufel, let's analyze it. It says stronger than our Mishnah that only a single aid kusi is accepted. My kamashman lochayda. What's Rabbi adding? It says that in the Mishnah, Tanina kol get yesh all of 8 kusi puzzle. It says clearly in our Mishnah, and we made that difference, that it says 8 echad. So what I need the B'lais Rabbi to come and add? Saying no. Even Maslis and having now the Mishnah alone, I could have argued that through Treinam. If you only had the Mishnah, I could have argued the Mishnah would hold that even 2 kusim sign is good enough. So why the Mishnah say 1? The Haidik Tani Chad, because all other contracts is no good. And the Chiddush is that even if it's only 1 kusi, you have a yid on it. And 1 kusi, all other contracts we don't believe. That's the Chiddush Mishnah. The Chiddush Mishnah is not to say that what a kusi is believed by Gittin. The bigger Chiddush is that a kusi is not believed by Shar Shtaris. And even if there's only 1 kusi and you have 1 Yisrael, you would have thought, oh, we already have a yid on it, maybe it's good enough. No. Kamashlan. But today, Loy says the Gemara, you're telling me that you will not believe, but the Mishnah brings a story. Get Isha, there was a get. There were 2 witnesses there that were kusim. The Hechsher and you were Machsher. You're right. Amend the Mishnah. That's not a dove, it's a supporting story. So just read a dove. His witness, there was only 1 witness, a lone witness that was a kusi. No, there were 2 witnesses. No, boss. But Agamil Miflik Poland. In fact, Agamil is not supporting the first part of the Mishnah. He's arguing. The Chasudi Mechsen, a couple of words are missing in the Mishnah. This is how you should learn. That interesting. Abaye thinks it's easier to amend the Mishnah than to add words, and Rabbi thinks it's easier to add words than to amend. But Agamil Machshe Bishnaim. Agamil Machshe Bishnaim. Because generally speaking, when the Mishnah brings a story, it's always supporting. And here suddenly Rabbi is coming along saying the story is coming to argue. I get each of my 8 of 80 kusim behechshi with Machshe even 280. Next Mishnah.
I wonder if you can apply that as a klal in the derech
Libud.
What you just said about amending as opposed to. Sure.
Yeah. Well, we had a number of times in Aaron and other places that if you have a Mishnah with a problem, do we say it's better to say it's 2 Tanoim in the Mishnah, or it's the same person, but you have to work out how to add a few words here. Yeah. Kol hashtaris, all contracts, ha'oilim that are brought up, the erkoyish lev, all contracts are brought up in a goyish court. Afa pisha chaismeim oiv de kachavim. Even though now we're not talking about 8 kushim, now we're talking about ordinary goyim, but in a goyish court, proper court, and they have a contract there. Even though it's signed by goyim, but this is a transaction between 2 yidden. Who cares? Remember 2 yidden, and even though it's signed by goyim, kshedim is kosher. Now Rashi actually adds here, and they have this big discussion. Rashi adds it was actually written inside. Rashi says mokum beis vada yoni kvin shalahem. It was written inside the courtroom. It's not only that there was a stamp or whatever it is. It was all done and signed, documented in front of a court. So in other words, according to Rashi, it seems it has to be the judges have to be involved as well. You will see later. We'll see later.
Interesting Rashi doesn't comment on that.
I'll tell you which Rashi I'm getting this from, but we'll see later. Once you see the later Rashi, come back here, you see it's much more than that. Okay. What do you call it? Except is the get of a woman of goyim, a sign on it, it's no good. Comes along Reb Shimon, and he argues with everything. Reb Shimon says, Af eluk shading. Reb Shimon said, no, even a get signed by goyim is kosher. And we'll see later. When do we say that shtaris are no good? When do we say that shtaris are no good? When we said before, shtaris are no good, was more explaining what it means, is only if it's done in ordinary way. But from the bezin is good. But he holds that even a get is valid. How? We'll see in a minute. So first of all, says the Gemara, there's 2 kinds of shtaris. Remember we discussed a while ago, there are 2 kinds of shtaris. There's a shtar raya and there's a shtar kinyan. A shtar raya means the kinyan took place because I gave you money, or whatever I did a kinyan. and then I need some supporting evidence in the future. Anybody comes and stakes a claim on it, that's called a shtar raya. Then we have a concept called a shtar kinyan. Shtar kinyan, where the edis actually establish like a shtar matana. If I'm giving you a gift, you're not paying for anything else. So how are you kinyan? One of the ways is through the shtar. The shtar itself is the transaction. And by getting the kedushin, it goes a step further because there's chav lacharin. You're harming the whole world. So shtar makes it called eidekiyim. The edim that are okay. I gave you a logic last time. You follow that logic, everything makes sense. The logic is, when we say you have all the laws of edim, the Torah, to follow the prescription of the Torah, is when it's exeris hakasuv, is when the edim are making it happen. The eidekiyim, shtamatana, gittin kedushin, because a piece of paper is a piece of paper, and we have a rule of Chaim Briskin talks about, mipihem v'loim piksav. If edim, write on a piece of paper, you have to hear it from the mouth. So how can a shtar be good? How can a shtar be good? So therefore, we have special rules. The Torah gave a rule. You want a piece of paper to be transformed into a document that can actually make things happen. That it's not mipihem v'loim piksav. It's not just written down, which is not valid. So you have to follow my prescription. It has to be two kosher edim and all the laws of edis. But then you have another kind of edis, which is the laws of probability, credibility. Is this credible? Is it not credible? Shtar raya is credibility. We're trying to prove that this happened. This is not making it happen. What happened is because you gave money for the property, you bought the property. But how do we know it happened? Question of credibility. There we have the rules of probability. When it comes to money transactions, probability is good enough. Tosis in Baba Kama quotes a Rashi, which we don't have, but he quotes a Rashi from the Gemara right here. That Rashi holds that edim that are kosher on a get is mahatayra. How can going be kosher mahatayra? We have all the rules by Yidden. The only way you can understand that is because these edim are different than the ordinary edim where we need achiv and so on and so forth, where they make it happen. This is talking about a transaction, a money thing, and all you need is the laws of probability. And therefore, mahatayra goyim are good enough. Taisus learned that no, it's only the Rabbanan. It's a takana the Rabbanan made, that the goyim should be believed in certain cases. In other words, Taisus is saying here that there's no difference whether in all cases you follow the prescription of the Torah of Edis, or at least just here, Chum made it special to make life easier, or as we'll see. So there's a very fundamental argument here.
Is there an element of like a kinyan chlipin that the shtar represents? I can't be Moshe. No. The shtar represents the transfer.
There's a beautiful Reb Chaim on the Rambam about explaining how a shtar works. By getting how do agents sign that piece of paper so that it becomes a document that can make things happen when it says in the P Olympics something. Argument the Rambam and the Ramban is very interesting. So and there Reb Chaim lays down to say this. Doesn't say exactly what we said, but there's a general idea how a shtar works. Okay, so let's continue. So the Gemara says, so kapasik v'tani, the Mishnah makes no distinction here when we say that oile berkoishel akum goyim sign is good enough. No difference mechel matana. No, there's no difference if it's a shtar raya. No difference if it's a shtar that makes it happen. So bishleim mecher when it comes to a sale. When the Yid gives them other Yid money, he bought the property. This document is purely evidence that it happened. We have a logic that the logic steps in. There's no way that the goyim are going to sign in front of a court about an event that never happened, because it's not a question that this shtar makes it happen. Shtar is only credibility. They have credibility. Why would they go and lie, and sign a public document and later on turn out to be there was a lie, and they ruin reputation for their reputation for the rest of their lives? So it gives us some confidence that they're saying the truth. Because let's start matana. Matana, it's not a question just of credibility. It's a question: how was this transacted? Does it belong to the other person? But my kakani, how is the other person going to be kind of the property if I give you a matana? With this document. Or it's a piece of paper, because why? Because they're not validated. Shmuel says, Dina the Malchusa Dina. The Dina of Goyim, this is Shmuel, the one who said Dina Malchusa Dina, and the Ritva writes in a few places that nobody in Shas argues with Shmuel on this principle of Dina Malchusa Dina. But this is his innovation, and this is one of the unique aspects of Yiddishkeit versus all other religions. There's no such concept, Sharia and all these things. There's no concept that we accept the laws of the land.
Jews have an Indian that you have to serve. You're in. That's why Jews serve in the Israeli army, and then have cousins Jews who serve in the Jordanian army.
But it may not be a religious. Exactly, it might be a cultural thing. Yeah.
That's only in the moment, isn't it?
Okay, so Din Machos, 20 seconds. Din Machos is according to the Beis Shmuel and Eben Ezer, it's only Midrabanan. Most opinions hold this Torah, and I told you last time. Rashi says the basis for this is we learned yesterday. The basis for this is because Goyim have feminist Benoich, one of them is Dinin. This falls under the banner of Dinin. Others say that if you remember, we learned that in the Dorim, Aran in the Dorim, where the Ran in the Dorim says, since the king has the right to evict you from your house, even today, the government can throw you, they can give you compensation, but they can basically displace you. Therefore, they own you. And that's why you have to follow the land, and that's why the land has a big chiddush there. But in Israel, there's no dinah malchusa dinah because the government has no right to evict you, which is a pretty amazing thing. Others say it's a dinah of kibush, so a king can conquer the land, and therefore they own the whole land. Same idea, and so on and so forth. But he buys him. Another answer is, you're right. Learn chutz begittin nashim. You're right. It doesn't mean shtar matana also going don't work. They're arguing. What's the argument here? So the one I want to say they're arguing this, do we take a believe in dinner? Which the Ritva told you say clearly nobody argues. But what's the Sibai Seima? The first answer says that a shtar matana is included in the machus dinner, and the second one says that no, shtar matana won't work. What's going on here? The argument is what you just raised. How far do we take dinner machus dinner? According to some Rishonim, it only goes things that benefit the entire kingdom, like taxes, building roads, those kind of levies. You got to follow, but the laws between one person and another, commercial laws and civil laws and all that, does not fall under din machusadina because it doesn't benefit the government directly. Others say, as a society, all the laws that benefit society at large, not just one group, society at large, fall under the banner of din machusadina. That's the machlik of these two answers right here. The first answer says that a shtar matan is included in din machusadina. What does the government have from that? Nothing. But as a society, we have to have rules, and you have to be able to sell properties, give away people. You can give people property, and how are you going to give it to them? How do you transact? You have to give them something, a shtar. But the second answer says no. Din machusadina only pertain to matters that directly benefit the government, and a contract. If I buy a house or give you a house, has nothing to do with the government. Therefore, doesn't fall in the machzedin, that wouldn't work. That's exactly what the machlek in these two opinions are. The famous Shach there says in Lamates that din machzedin cannot work if it's against the Torah. That's one thing you have to remember. If it contravenes any laws of the Torah, then we don't follow the machzedin. But then there's a whole discussion about commercial laws of the Torah. What happens then? But anyway, let's continue right there. And one of the things that we say is a kinyan called kinyan setumtu, where you shake each other's hand. We close the barrel. In other words, it's not the kinyan where it's a kinyan that the society recognizes a kinyan, like Tkiyas. So then they want to say that if you live in a society where din machzedin behaves in a certain way, then when you went into your contract, whatever transaction you did, it's as if you made up a tanai that I am in this case going to follow these rules, and a tanai always works. The Torah recognizes tonight. Let's continue. How could Rav Shimon say that and get they can sign, but they're not shaykh to cases? Rav Shimon is following the view of Rabbi Lazar. We're talking about a case of here, the Gittin, where there were 80 Jewish Adim standing there and witnessed the whole event, which means the other studies, even the Jewish Adim there that witnessed the event, but if there's a contract, goyim are not to be believed. For example, Hedyatis. If Hedyatis signed a contract, where Rashi explained, he signed a contract, and we didn't know who saw Masira, you still would not rely on the contract at all. You cannot use a contract, worthless. Now, to ask a question we learned before. The fact is, you have Goyish Adim there, so if you have no Adim is one thing, you can rely on Masira. But if you have Adim, why aren't we worried that next time you're going to rely directly on these Adim, you're going to call these Adim forward and rely on whatever it says in the Shtar on these Adim? And maybe worse, you're going to trust them in other cases as well. You know what we're talking about here? The Shem is Mubhakin. We're talking about well-recognized names that everyone knows that these are Goyish names. And because these are recognized names, Rav Shimon says, we're not Goyizer, that next time you're going to rely on them, you're going to rely on them. We're not worried about it. Heichi Domi Shemus and What's an example of a Goyish name? Omra Puppet. Kigoin Hurmiz. Taisa disagrees. He says Hurmiz is actually a Choshev name. He says Herman. Yeah, Hurmiz. We're going to have, if it's the bottom half or the top half of a person. Taisa says it's Herman. Herman is a name that a Yid will never call themselves by that name. It's the name of the Sutton and the name of a shed. Yeah, the name of a shed. You know any Hermans? Herman Monster. Herman Wood. Herman Wood, that's right. Oh.
Generation of American Jews.
That's right. They like that.
Hyman is one thing, and Herman. Yeah. And Herman is
Probably.
anyway. So they didn't learn traces of Gittin Daf at all. Then there's a name called Abudina. It's one long name. Bar Shipsoi. Tastes make sure it's Shipsoi, not Shapsi, because tastes like Shapsi in our gears of tastes. Shapsi is a Jewish name. That means even in those days, Shapsi was a name. The Shach Shapsi coin, which was many years later. Ubakidri, Ubati, Benokiman. These are all names obviously were rampant in the times of the Gemara that were Goyish names, and even hard to ever use them. Avol, so you want to ask a question. So what are you telling me? But Shem Hashem of Hakim, Anaget. Adam Asira, but if he had Goyish names that you call him Joseph or Moses, whatever it is, then lie. Obviously, you cannot rely on such a get because it's scary. Because next time you're going to rely thinking that they're Eden. So Aditani is safer. Why does Shimon have to introduce in the sefer? Lo huskru elabazman shenasa behedid. Why does he have to say in the sefer that when this isn't mentioned only when is it possible when it's done behedid? Leave. Like, well, they talk about Gittin itself. Make a distinction with Gittin. A mad run. When do we rely on Gittin? Only the names are obvious Goyish names. They're not obvious Goyish names. You cannot rely, even though you have Adam, Asida, Yid, and everything else. If the names recorded in the start are Goyish names, are not recognized as Goyish names. You can create all kinds of issues. Then in the future they rely on these Adam and so on and so forth. Make distinction within get itself. Why introduce why talk about other status? Yeah.
Mistake there. I pointed out to me this is a better pizza because now it's driving me crazy. I'm talking about it the whole time.
Obviously, Peter.
What's going on?
Says the Gemara further. Good question. Do some homework. Do some homework. Find out more about him and tell us. Share with us the information. It's exactly what he's saying here. It's exactly what he's saying here. When do we say this? B'shemus of Hakim, we can rely on the get. I will b'shemus of Hakim, but if names are not reliable, you cannot rely on the get. Just like when it comes to an ordinary contract, if it was written outside of a court. Nasa Kamisha, Nasa Behedit. It's like an ordinary contract that was done by a hedyot. Upsuli possible. So not that we're coming to make a distinction by other studies, whether it's done from a court or not from a court. It's coming to tell you the difference is whether by a get itself. When do we treat it as if it's done like it's done in the court, or when we say no, it's like done by hedyot, and therefore it is no good. Now, what I want to tell you about Rashi is if you look 3 lines on top of the page, all of these Goyish names, says Rashi, Kulam Shemas Dayone Oivigachavne. What do you mean Dayone Oivigachavne? We're talking about the witnesses who signed the thing. It's as if Rashi is saying it's much more than that. It's as if the Dayanim themselves have to give a Geshtemke, they have to sign to verify this document. Much more than just having Goyim sign the thing. When it says Erkoyas, doesn't mean only presented in front of the thing. It sounds like from Rashi that it has to be done in the court. The judges have to sign, and the judges are worried about their reputation more than the average person in the street. That's what Rashi says. Okay, let's get finished. Another answer is safe on Asan Legite Mammon. You're right. The end of the Mishnah is not talking about Gittin anymore. It's going back to the original part of the Mishnah. He goes going to everybody. Shimon no longer is talking. This part is going back to Chachamim. When we say that an ordinary contract is possible, this is what you heard, that it's possible only hedyot, but if it's done in that koyas, it is kosher. Okay. We'll